Hey everyone, welcome to House Groups. This week we started a new series where we're studying the incredible chapter of Mark 8. And this week we're focusing on when Jesus miraculously fed 4,000 people. And when this story is told in the book of Matthew, it tells us that the 4,000 were actually just the men that they counted, and there were also women and children on top of that as well. So it's a lot of people that Jesus cared for that day. And it should make us think about how we care for people. One thing that I find really interesting in this passage is that it said Jesus called his disciples to him and he says, I have compassion for these people. If I send them home hungry, they will collapse. And the disciples ask, well, where can anyone get food to feed them? And Jesus says, how many loaves do you have? And they say, 7. And then Jesus takes them and breaks them, and he has the disciples hand them out and collect the extras. And then Jesus sends them away. And what I find really fascinating about all that is that at no point in the passage does it talk about if the disciples have compassion on the people. Jesus' compassion is the only thing that matters. And he could totally have acted all by himself to provide for that compassion. We know that. He did stuff like that in the book of Exodus, for example, where he provides manna from heaven, heavenly bread for the Israelite peoples when they're wandering in the desert. He did that all by himself. But instead, here in this part, he puts the disciples to work. He takes their bread and he has them hand it out and collect it. And they do it not because they have suddenly become all compassionate as well, but because Jesus has compassion and we are to serve the people that Jesus is compassionate about. We're supposed to be compassionate about Jesus' compassion. And it should really make us realize that our resources and our labor needs to be at Jesus' disposal for what he cares about, not just what we care about. Our Christian life, in America especially, has been so saturated by Western culture, a culture of self-determination and consumerism, and follow your dreams and find your true self and do what you were made to do. And it can be hard sometimes to tell where we are serving Jesus and where we are just serving ourselves with Christian terms. We've got to weed those things out from one another. When I was in college, and me and my friends were all trying to figure out what to do with our lives, we'd hear from professors in the school in general. They'd often quote a famous Christian author to us. His name was Frederick Buechner. And he said that the place God calls you is to the place where your deepest gladness and the world's deep hunger meets. Or in other words, your calling in life is where your passions, your talents, and the world's needs come together at the same point. And I think there's probably something to that. But the problem embedded in that is that it assumes that you should base your life's work on what you are passionate about and talented at and find deep gladness in. And if it's not meeting one of those things, then it's not what you should be doing. But instead, we should be basing our life's work in what Jesus is passionate about. He never asked his disciples, if any of you are passionate about feeding these hungry people and are good and talented at serving, and it brings you deep gladness to make these hungry people feel better and strong to walk home. And if you're willing to give me your bread, then here's an opportunity that you might feel called to. No, he doesn't say that. He says, I have compassion and you serve me. So go enact my compassion on people with your resources and your labor. I think that's important. In churches, especially churches like ours, we're always in danger of relaxing into consumeristic Christianity. But it will take all of us to not just come here to church because it's entertaining or it gives us a certain theological depth that we like or has the friends in the community that we crave. All of those things are important, but we need to constantly work at being a church of people that puts God's compassion for the world above our own passions. Because it is there in his passion that we will find a much deeper satisfaction. Now, don't get me wrong. Your passions and your talents are a gift from God that you've been entrusted with to glorify him. But in your small groups tonight, try to tease out where in your life you are serving your passions and where you are serving God using or even despite your passions.